very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Since you're here, let me ask you, have you liked the video and subscribed to Bharata First? If no, then please do so now. Do subscribe to our newsletter as well to get some incisive information. And how can I not tell you about the Bharata First Knowledge Center? It is our one-stop destination for all your competitive exams needs. We now have 26 amazing courses, all put together to help you in your competitive exams and also make you better Bharatiyas. Live classes for the second phase have begun. Do ensure that you register now and participate in the interactive sessions. We currently also have several classes that are ongoing, and we've started the second phase with personality development. Management classes will begin over the weekend as well. The timetable is out, and you can get all these details at kc.bharatafirst.com. You can go here and get the details and register now. Many candidates who cleared the UPSC CSE this year have thanked Bharata First and the Knowledge Center for playing a big part in their success. So don't be left behind and don't regret later. Register now at kc.bharatafirst.com. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of the video. Please go through it. And now on to the discussion. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Saturday praised the decades-old relationship between India and Israel as he asserted that the cooperation between the two countries has played a key role in the growth stories of the two nations. He issued a special video message marking 30 years of the establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Israel.
30 साल पहले आज ही के दिन हमारे बीच डिप्लोमेटिक रिलेशंस पूर्ण रूप से स्थापित हुए थे। दोनों देशों के बीच एक नए अध्याय की शुरुआत हुई थी।
Israel and India have a gehri dosti or a deep friendship, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said, and thanked his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi for his deep commitment to the strong and robust friendship.
There's something I want to say to all of the people of India. Israel and India have a gehri dosti, deep friendship. Today we honor 30 years of diplomatic relations between Israel and India.
Now, though India had recognized Israel on September 17, 1950, full-fledged diplomatic relations between the two countries were established on January 29, 1992. Since then, the bilateral relations between both countries have developed into a multifaceted strategic partnership. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze 30 years of formal diplomatic ties between India and Israel and where the bilateral relationship is today. Joining me on the program today are Anil Trigunayat, former ambassador, and KV Prasad, senior journalist. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me start the program with you. 29th of January 2022 was a landmark day for both India and Israel because even though ties were established many decades ago, but formally they were announced in 1992, 30 years now. I would say that the relationship has grown from strength to strength. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. In fact, I can say that when 1992, when we established diplomatic relations, I was the desk officer in the Ministry of External Affairs at the time, Deputy Secretary in charge, looking at the region and then when it happened. So it was a great moment. Of course, there were a lot of changes taking place in the Middle East itself. And therefore, it was appropriate for India to go ahead with the decision that we did. But of course, as you know, that we recognized Israel in 1950. And there's some kind of an immigration office which was set up in Mumbai at the time. And then it continued different levels, consulate and all that. But then the actual diplomatic relations were in fact established, as you mentioned, 30 years ago. Now, this is a relationship which is a lot of time was not being talked about, was often predicated on the basis of the Palestinian issue, or was always seen in the Arab context. And therefore, India was generally having this policy of engaging with Israel in security, in technology areas, in defense sectors gradually, and including intelligence cooperation and others, despite the fact that there has been a tremendous affection at the popular level from both sides. I mean, it is interesting to note that all young IDF soldiers or the Israeli other forces people, once they complete their training, to unwind, the first place of their choice is India. They come here for a month or so, go around and go into the Ladakh or in mountains or wherever and enjoy themselves and relax. So they look up to India very much. So I think that relationship has really moved in a real strategic orbit. But what has happened is that we continue to grow our relationship, and there's been a tremendous exchange, but we never had the visit of the Prime Minister. And that is in essence from India, an Indian Prime Minister, wherever he goes, it makes a big news. I mean, especially whether it's in Africa or anywhere. And we had this, the deficit of high-level exchanges from India to the Middle East in general. I mean, I remember when I was Joint Secretary in 2008, and I was surprised to see that we did not have any visits at the Prime Minister level or the President or Vice President to any of the GCC or the Middle East countries until then, whereas their kings and others were coming here and they always connected. For whatever reason, Pakistan was one of the factors. But then we arranged the visit of Dr. Manmohan Singh in 2008 to go to first to Oman, Qatar, and then 2010 to Saudi Arabia. And then I took Vice President to Kuwait and all that. Now, these things make so much of difference, and that's what we felt there. So when Prime Minister Modi took over, generally everybody thought that because he was close to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was chief minister, and a lot of projects in agriculture sector, others were being done there, that now the Arab countries started fearing that there will probably be a hiatus on the part of India on the Arab support and the support to Palestine. But fortunately, the first visit of Prime Minister was to UAE, right? And thereafter, he standalone for the 25th anniversary, he visited Israel, Tel Aviv, and thereafter independently, he visited Palestine. So what I'm trying to say that this dehyphenation of our policy in the Middle East, and especially with regard to Palestine and Israel, despite our continued support to the Palestinian cause and the two-state solution, is the fulcrum of the growth of this relationship. Because bilaterally, our relationship is going on smoothly. Right. But high-level exchanges, and of course, it is now, you can say in 30 years, we have seen the maturity that now we have come into sub-regional cooperation with the new Quad, which we call it, with US, UAE, and Israel, because there is a greater change and the churn that is taking place in the region.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of areas of convergence really as far as India and Israel are concerned, and the relationship has matured just like a good old wine, and that's what we are seeing between India and Israel as well. Let me welcome on the program Shubhimal Bhattacharjee, cybersecurity expert and analyst as well. Shubhimal, if you could please switch on your camera. In the meantime, let me go across to KV Prasad now to get some views about what is happening today really as far as India and Israel are concerned. No wonder the ties are in a great spot despite change in leadership. We've seen that there hasn't been really any kind of an issue between India and Israel. The only issue that we see at the moment is probably the Pegasus one, and it's being raised in Parliament as well. Would you see that as a stumbling block?
Well, I think that's an issue that we have to see. One, we have a court-monitored or a court-appointed inquiry going into it. So that is something which everybody is going to look at it. Pegasus certainly was an idea. The opposition had flagged the issue much before the Parliament session began, and I'm sure since the session is going on, they have promised to raise it in the floor of the House, and the government has already said what it has said outside the House at the point of time. Well, if you know, reports coming out of Israel have tell us that Pegasus itself is facing some kind of an issue back home because of the increasing international scrutiny on this. We just read statements by the top officials of Pegasus, and also many other factors. So this is an unraveling thing. the latest New York Times report, which referred to many things. So I think all this is still to wait. But India-Israel relationships move much beyond this, in the sense, as Ambassador Trigunit also put out. And I think if you really go back, the fact that Indians' affinity to our understanding of Israel grew even before we formally recognized Israel as a country. And I think if you go through the debates of the Constituent Assembly and legislative section, there have been references when members of parliament asked the prime minister at that point of time, the external affairs minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, as to what is the government of India policy vis-a-vis Israel. So there are articulations on those fronts, and obviously by the 50, as Ambassador had put out, we had formally recognized the country, and the commissioner or they had set up the consulate much later, of course. So the immigration officer and so on and so forth. So between 47 until 50, there have been a few questions from members of parliament in the Constituent Assembly. That having said that, I think it has moved at a very fast clip. In 30 years span, today we have Israel as a strategic partner, strategic country. We are looking at not beyond defense and security remains a top-notch engagement between the two countries for a very long time, but it has gone beyond that. I think if you look at one of the deepest cooperations that's happening is in the field of agriculture. We are now looking also at the water management, because the Israel field, they have a technology and they have the wherewithal to support a country like India, especially as they have expertise in the arid zone cultivations, the drip irrigation technology. These are some of the fine prints they're looking at. Of course, cybersecurity is part of the new drill. So I think and India is, if you look at terms of partnership, I think the third largest trading partner for Israel from Asia. So these are all issues, but the people-to-people relationship is beyond that. As Ambassador Trigunit was saying, I remember the last time or the first time I visited Israel was when Ambassador Trigunit was in the region. We had gone with President Pranab Mukherjee. That was the last time we actually had a state visit where the delegation visited Palestine first before they came on to Jerusalem to complete the Israel leg. So that was it. And since then, the policy of dehyphenation became accentuated.
Absolutely. Shubhimal, let me bring you in. Several issues down, that are directly concerned with you have been brought up by both the panelists: cyber security, cyber technology. Let me add cyber warfare to that, and the changing nature of warfare that we are seeing as well. We are looking at space wars too now. That seems to be the new catchphrase, if I could use that term. So from that perspective, India and Israel, probably Israel is one of those very few countries who's open to sharing technology with India, and we are working closely with Israel on several of these aspects. So that is a big area of cooperation and strength too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Frank. I think this relationship, particularly on the technology front, is, I would say, way ahead of many other relationships that India has in this sphere. And Israel's technology, goes much beyond the cyber domain. Definitely, they are one of the countries that have cooperated with us. Definitely, they have been at the cutting edge of cybersecurity, chip manufacturing, quantum computing, all of these areas that we as a country imbibing and pushing across a digital, India policy for the last, few years. I think Israel fits very well in our scheme of things, because getting cooperation in technology area with a major power like US has not always been one of the best experiences. And here, if you see with Israel, you are working on some of the flagship areas. Even personally, I have also been involved in a couple of projects, and I have seen how inquisitive and how aspirational they have been 15-20 years back, what we are now trying to get across. Having said so, do we think that whatever that we are able to get out, the cooperation is sufficient or stagnant or anything. No, I think there are a lot of areas in which we will require a lot of their involvement, particularly in cybersecurity and quantum technology. I think that's where we are looking at a lot of cooperation even in the future. I think in data analytics, again, this is one of the forefront countries. And the fact that, after so many years now, we are talking of getting 2 chip manufacturing units in the country and the paraphernalia associated with it. There will be a lot of other ancillary stuff that comes with it. Israel has been one of the countries that has been, I would say, blessed by all the large American companies also when it comes to this particular area. So semiconductor is one area where we can get a lot of support out of them. So I remain very, very hopeful, Frank, that we have a lot of positive sides to do. I think the whole episode around the NSO story that is, of course, now under the court's jurisdiction, and whatever is flowing out of the media stories and all, I think that is something that both the countries have to handle it very well, have to come out very clean also about it. But on top of it, I think the horizons of technology definitely seems to be a mutually win-win scenario.
Absolutely. Let me take this particular aspect forward with you, Ambassador. The Pegasus issue, at some point in time, do you think it's going to be a nail in, in a thorn in our flesh, rather, between India and Israel, or do you see both nations rising above it? Like Mr. Bhattacharjee has just pointed out, I think we have to come clean, and that's what the public is looking for.
Well, I mean, we are both democracies, and Israeli government has already, to a great extent, abandoned NSO. And the US government has banned it, actually put in the blacklist of sorts. So the Pegasus or the NSO controversy in India will continue for a while, but it will not have any direct impact on the bilateral relationship or the direction of it, because that is far, far more diverse and deep. And so I don't see that it is going to impact in any which way our relationship, because see, our intelligence cooperation, our cyber security cooperation, as Subal mentioned, in the area of technology transfer, which we need a great deal, so that has been the cornerstone of our relationship. Now, cyber security, and this is also espionage, and it is not uncommon. I mean, we have seen what happened when the CIA tried to, I think, bug the phone of Angela Merkel. So this is not something that happens. It happens everywhere in the world. It's a given. Most governments, irrespective of the kind of political dispensation they have, try to keep a tab on people and on political parties, opposition, and all that. This is a given. So, but since it's a fodder, and it gives you some kind of a charged thing to discuss about. So I think this will continue. But of course, as clearly the government has to come out of it and has to come clean on whatever. But I would say that as things stand, you can only go by the statement that the government has made, and it has to then defend it if there are any specific allegations or any evidence to the contrary appears. So that's there. But for the bilateral relationship, I do not see any impact in that sense of the term.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. It's good to know that we are in a good place and we are above all of this. At the end of the day, we are good friends, and that's how it should be. KV Prasad, coming back to you now, the fact that things have changed within the region itself and between nations, especially in West Asia. At one point in time, Saudi Arabia, United States, and the GCC countries were sworn enemies of the Israelis, but then we had the Abraham Accords in 2020. So has that also made things easier for India as a whole?
Well, I think India's policy has been irrespective of what, for a long time, we had a different kind of arrangement, which Ambassador alluded to. But since 1992, I think if you remember, one of the very illustrative books which mentions about this catching the tide was when India was wanting to accord permission or according full-fledged diplomatic relations with in the early 1990s. Then Prime Minister Narasimha Rao had sent Indian Foreign Service officers to engage and make sure that the Palestinians were on board. In the sense, and the Palestinians did mention that they were also opening up and the relationship was changing. By the way, all this is mentioned in the former Foreign Secretary, Mr. Jain Dikshit's book, My Years in South Block. A very categorical, he mentions a lot of things. So the drift in what was happening in the region, India caught it much ahead of time and moved with the time. Now, Abraham's Accord comes in 2020, and just as we speak, I think the president of Israel has either concluded or is in UAE, just 2 months after the visit of Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. So this is something which is, the churn is taking place, and India is absolutely aware of it. But the geopolitical situation itself is changing, not just in the region. If you look at it, the way America has post-Trump, there is a different way of looking at things. I mean, it has not really shifted dramatically, but today the whole attention is Russia, Ukraine, what's happening in Indo-Pacific. So the region itself, whether during Trump time or post-Trump time, is the American interest the same as it was much before that? Because that also is a link to the oil economy. The kind of, if you look at, that's how the geopolitical or geostrategic calculations that came in. So the region is changing. I think India has its own approach, irrespective of what's happening. And the Abraham Accords has put in place a certain understanding. I'm sure the members of the South Bloc and former colleagues of Ambassador Triviner watch it carefully.
Absolutely. Shrimal, coming back to you now, changing times, changing geopolitical situations as well. So what are the areas of cooperation? What are the areas that need special focus, do you think, between India and Israel going forward?
Frank, I think, with Israel, we have maintained an excellent relationship. And just adding a line to Mr. Prasad's comments here, that significantly, our Air India flights to Israel used to fly over Saudi Arabia. So, so India had a special, you can say, position, or even from a geopolitical point of view, much ahead of, what now comes through as the cooperation in the Middle East. So we are, very well poised. We have relationships very well balanced in the region. And as far as the relationship with Israel goes, it continues and it grows much further in the areas of technology. For example, a controversial technology like face recognition technology. That's, Israelis have been at one of the forefront of such technology, where, the threshold limits of the success of identifying an individual is almost as good as 99.5 to 6%. So the precision technology today, aided by all the terms that we hear, like artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning, and on top of it, the march towards quantum computing, I think there are a lot of opportunities to cooperate. Mind you, the cooperation with Israel at the highest level in the government to the scientific community also has now very well drenched at the academic level. There are institutions cooperating on specific areas of technology. So I think moving forward in the high-end technology space, related primarily around cyber defense, the cusp of cyber and defense, that is where, the embedded technology that's improving day by day, that is being optimized day by day, that's where something that we can work. We are already working. Many of the modernization that we have undertaken in our defense equipments, which otherwise was going out of its shelf life, has actually been undertaken, with the Israeli companies like, LB Delta and all this. Similarly, even the special mission suites in, otherwise what could have been an American or a French aircraft for these, special forces and all, that has also been actually undertaken with Israeli technology. Space remains an open area now that, we are also looking forward in going out in that. And most importantly, and even taking a little bit cue at the mindset of the government in trying to look at the future of the defense, forget only the indigenization part and the Atmanirbhar policy, where you are looking to get the domestic industry up. But a significant announcement in this year's budget, for example, taking the defense R&D money also to the private sector. And a lot of these private sector today have built up their relationships with Israel. So if they are at a certain threshold of technology, they can both jointly develop and research and come to a scenario where they are able to come up with newer products and can go to the markets in the region or even to the other countries. So I think we have plenty of areas to work on. I think we have to identify the priority 5-6 sectors. We still face a lot of difficulty in getting technology, high-end technology from the superpowers as such, because they still have those specific laws and rules when it comes to giving it to the rally. So this is where Israel has been helpful.
Sure.
This is what is being recognized, and this is where we can possibly shorten the time span in which we mature our systems and technology, and then into manufacturing and the services.
Absolutely. All right, time to get closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward and what next really as far as these two friends are concerned. Starting first with the Ambassador.
Well, I think we are already on the critical, collaborating on the critical areas, which are absolutely necessary as we look forward to the AI-driven Industrial Revolution 4.0 as far as India is concerned. And I think Israel can be a very willing and trusted partner in that. As far as Israel is concerned, I mean, it has a big market in India. It is the third biggest defense supplier to India. So it's a win-win relationship on both sides. In addition, there is a great collaboration at the P2P level. The Jews who lived in India, about 80,000 of them who went back to Israel have really become the ambassadors of India. I've met many of them, and they would be happy to come back to India, some of them, very often. We had a great time here. But I think that we have already set up this, as Sushmal mentioned. I mean, we have this fund, which they call it I for F, in which both sides have really contributed $20 million each for the R&D, and some 11-12 projects have been approved, 30 centers of excellence in agriculture sector. What I think more we can do together is we can work together within the ambit of trilateral or quadrilateral cooperation in Africa, like in Israel, India, and UAE, in, for example, Africa, in the agricultural sector, food processing sector, and work on the mutually beneficial areas and advantages.
Absolutely. KV Prasad? Yeah.
I think, Frank, one issue which is there, I think Israel has been a great startup country. And just as India has embarked on this journey, and I think if you take a point of what Mr. Shuriwal was making, that's something where our startups have a great opportunity to move into critical areas and areas which are expanding, because Israel has had a head start on this issue. And remember, something like what we probably export more was the precious stones and diamonds probably, but that's going to go beyond that. And now today, Israel also has something called fintech, which is a new area which India is embarking upon. Obviously, it's a spin-off from the technology and technical development. So there are umpteen areas where we are moving in, and I say we can move forward on those.
Absolutely. And Shubhimal, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Frank, I think, we are at a very comfortable relationship with Israel. Even the Israeli efforts to go and connect to the different parts of the country, including the Northeast, to provide agricultural technology has been, very, very welcome. I think technology remains as one of the beacon lights in which we cooperate. There are many areas, there are flagship areas in which we both can take up from the base of the relationship that we have built. I think we have specific areas, like semiconductor and chip manufacturing, quantum computing. I think these are two areas in which we can really cooperate both well for bolstering the cybersecurity bilateral cooperation, and hence, becoming a point of, global cybersecurity ecosystem.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, what's coming out of this discussion is that the bilateral relationship is in a very good place. Ties are very strong, and issues like the NSO or Pegasus will not have an impact on the relationship. It is just fodder and nothing else. The governments will, however, have to come clean on these issues, because let's not forget, we are democracies and the public deserves to know the truth. Now, there are several areas of cooperation between the two nations as well, especially in the fields of technology and agriculture. Going forward, we can work together on trilateral and quadrilaterals in Africa and other regions and ensure that we grow mutually. A lot of scope for cooperation, and we can truly work together to ensure that we grow as well. Now, before I go, let me once again remind you to like the video, subscribe, and share the content as well. Do subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive information. And how can I not tell you about the Bharata First Knowledge Center, a big success story? It is your one-stop destination for all your competitive exams needs. Now, we have 26 amazing courses all put together to help you in your competitive exams and also make you better Bharatiyas. Live classes for the second phase have begun. Do ensure that you register now and participate in the interactive sessions. We currently have classes going on in personality development and management as well. So enroll for them and reap the benefits of the Knowledge Center. Don't be left behind. Don't regret later. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of the video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.